Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Rare Earth Exchanges podcast. I'm Dustin, and I'm here with my co host, Daniel. And today we're diving into a critical topic shaping the modern world: China's dominance over rare earth elements. Rare earth elements are powering everything from smartphones to missile systems, but one country has an iron grip on this vital resource. So let's go ahead and explore how it happened and what it means to all of us.
Excellent.
So, Daniel, I've got some questions for you that I'm hoping you could answer for us.
Certainly, Dustin.
But let's just start with the basics. What are exactly rare earth elements, and why are they so critical to modern technology in the industry?
Well, as you mentioned, Dustin, it's a very important issue. The 17 elements that are actually technically rare earth, but also critical minerals, are absolutely vital. They're considered like the vitamins for the high-tech and green technology world of today. So these elements have been essentially monopolized by China in terms of the processing and the value-added production for output like magnets, for example. So this flies under the radar. And for most people, we're starting to see the topic surface more. For example, now President Trump's discussion of Greenland, for example. People think both the Arctic sea lane, but also minerals, critical minerals, rare earth elements. When you connect the dots of all of this, it's very clear how big the stakes are. The challenge here is, before we get into this Q&A, that there's segments of a value chain. There's mining that happens. So you're extracting these minerals and elements from various places. It used to be China had maybe 80% plus of that process. Now I think it's down to at 40% or so. It could be a little bit less, excuse me. Now, however, with the processing, the separation, the refining of the elements and minerals, China controls about 90% of this market. So, there's, again, one major rare earth mine in the United States, Mountain Pass in California. A good deal of the output that they produce is actually shipped to China for processing, even though Mountain Pass does some processing. So, why is this a big deal? Because, the world has changed, Dustin, and we can go into this a little bit more, but the age of post-World War II global order, where the United States has its allies, there was the Cold War, then that kind of fell apart. There was the War on Terror. And we get into the age of sort of national populism. So, we saw how Donald Trump, 2016, Brexit in England, in China, the growing nationalism, while they're trying to expand their global the tentacles global. There's growing tension between the United States and China, for example. And so, rare earth process, the rare earth complex was something. There's environmental issues. There can be environmental destruction. Actually, a lot that was outsourced. And so, for almost a couple decades, it's been a convenient relationship where companies have fixed have certain price points that they can count on. All that work gets done somewhere else. They get their inputs, their magnets, what have you. But that's changed. There's geopolitical tension. The United States, the Department of Defense, set up a rule where all magnets must be produced with non-Chinese companies and technology by 2027. That's just 24 months away. It's the whole landscape's changing, Dustin. So I think if we look at the basics, if we look at China controls over 70% of the processing, rare earth processing. They did this through a concerted, strategic approach to consolidate and monopolize that economic activity. in the age of sort of global trade, where global was the operative word, global was capitalized, the G was capitalizing global. This was okay. China grew based on, it built an immense economy based on this paradigm. But that's changed. We're in a new era. There are, countries like the United States have a lot of internal problems. The open, liberalized trade that was the previous era isn't necessarily working for a lot of people today. So, we're now entering the impact of China's dominance in this space. So I'll stop and pause for a minute, and I may have skipped a couple questions, but
No, you're good. So yeah, you touched on quite a few things, but I think it would be important to maybe emphasize kind of the points that are, where in the plan of China's strategic planning did they capitalize on this market? Why did they process so much? And why did we just drop the ball? Like, what? Talk more about that.
well, okay. So China, we've, as you know, Dustin, with rare earth exchanges and us building this platform, you know, aggregating information, providing original content, now starting to do these podcasts, we've learned a lot. And we're sort of outsiders, and that in a way has its negative, but also has some positive. We don't have necessarily, certain, how can I say this, biases, okay? So China has a three-prong plan. Number one, and the plan involves its emergence as the number one economy in the world, period. And they're on their way. Number one was to consolidate control over the rare earth processing. So this is an environmentally challenging business. It's involves, it's complex, and it's a commodity, so there's pressures on price point. So what they did is their industry was pretty much Wild West. It's centered in Inner Mongolia, so in the western outback of China. They had all these companies involved. It was pretty corrupt. The mining business over there, the processing business, it was pretty wild. And the Chinese government consolidated that business. They took probably, in total maybe 30 companies. That's not exact, but there's at least a dozen or two. They brought them together into 3 or 4 big companies, and we can talk about those companies in another podcast. But now these companies, some of them are publicly traded, but they're state owned. So the key is the state has a majority interest in these companies, and in some cases, maybe a bigger entity that's state-owned controls 51%. We can get into all that kind of information on another episode. But the key here is those companies are backed by the state. It's not a free market situation. And so as, the markets fluctuate, ebb and the price goes up and down, the Chinese state-backed companies can take advantage of that. They can put Western companies out of business because they don't have the pressure of, hey, if we don't get a certain profit by a certain quarter, we're done. They are backed by the, essentially the treasury of the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party. And so, this is what emerged over the past 10 years. These companies dominate the market. There is no transparency in the rare earth market. The pricing is controlled in China. There's a few websites that sort of serve a proxy, like Asian Metal, what have you. But you go there to get a general sense of some price points. What they do is they'll talk to buyers and sellers in China and elsewhere, and provide sort of a running survey of what they think is going on. So that was phase one, is to consolidate the rare earth space, right? The processing. So it's important to note, pretty soon we predict that instead of saying drill, baby, drill, we're going to be hearing dig, baby, dig for rare earths. However, that's not the problem. The problem is not that we need access to more rare earth elements. Yes, we could use stockpiles. Yes, if Trump figures out how to negotiate some deal with Greenland, sure, that can help, but it's not going to solve the problem. The problem is in the processing. The problem is in the value-added technology and production for products like magnets and such, that they control a good 80% plus. So that means that, you know, all the high-tech products that we need, we depend on that foundation. Now, that's phase one. Phase two is, they call it two rare earths China, two rare earth-based China. Phase two is to control value-added production for high-value products. So an example would be electric vehicles. China, or photovoltaic, or wind energy, or any number of other either green energy or other high-tech product that they can naturally work their way into. So take BYD as an example. That's a Chinese electric car producer. I believe they're in the vicinity of 70 or 80 billion dollars, I believe. I mean, it's huge. It's just overnight. It seems like it just.
Yeah, they are huge. They're on track to build more cars than Toyota and Ford, and those guys are pumping out about 6 million units a year. So BYD's they're posed to pass them up in 2025.
Amazing. But Dustin, from what we've learned from transcribing these Chinese plans, that this is the next phase, is to have control of companies that are producing in the aggregate hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue. Mm-hmm. Now, that's phase two, and we're in it right now. And remember, the rare earths are just the foundation. They're just a means to a bigger end. This is our interpretation, for what it's worth. Phase three, from what we've read, is the control of the digital currency. At some point, presumably, all nations are going to move into some form of digital currency or another. I'm no expert in that field. It's pretty much a complex, unfolding situation with Bitcoin, for example, and all kinds of derivations of other digital currency. But I do know that their ultimate aim, Dustin, is to control the digital currency, to be the main overseer, much like the United States is with the dollar, right? We've been the currency, the currency of exchange for like oil transactions, for example. Mm-hmm. That's what defines a superpower to some extent, right? So, and interestingly, Dustin, based on our reading, they want to do all of this without war. I mean, they don't want to really fire a shot. There is Taiwan. They do believe that is theirs. In fact, we recognize Taiwan as China. We don't have our embassy. We don't have a U.S. embassy in Taipei. We have a U.S. embassy in Beijing. So, even though the Taiwanese, broke off after the Revolution of '49, when Mao Zedong took over China, and they brought a culture that was there over to Taiwan, right? They tended to be more wealthy people, more educated, and they don't really want any part of China. But we'll see what happens. But either way, so there could be conflict there. China has not invaded really anybody other than like Tibet. They did move in. It can be a very ruthless government. We saw with Tiananmen Square. Mm-hmm. And, it's still a communist society. So we have to take that into account, that the government has a lot of control there. So there's a three-phase plan. Just to recap this, there's a three-phase process. One is control the rare earth process and production, not just the mining. So when you hear dig, baby, dig. Raise your hand and say that's not enough. We need here in the United States to or a network of Western allies to be able to process these products and have transparency and a proper capitalistic market, right? That's what we're about. Phase two is what we're in now. That's the value added outputs that come from the control of those rare earths. So BYD is a great example. We'll come up with more examples in other shows. And phase three is somehow, some way control the digital currency through the vast accumulation of wealth. They'll naturally be in a position to do that. That's what they want. I'll take a step back. What's your thoughts? What do you think, Dustin?
Well, I think it's alarming, and I think what's more alarming is the fact that it happened right under our nose. That it just feels like we're just like, what? How did this happen?
We didn't care. I mean, sorry to interrupt you, Dustin, but I mean, I've said that too, but it's just sort of like, it's just dirty work that someone else is doing. I mean, we didn't care. I mean, when you, in the age of globalism, where, China's gone from essentially a third world country to the second biggest economy in the world, thanks to Western liberalization of trade, capital markets, okay? Capitalism as a whole. This is what brought it up. And in that process, Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, Dustin, you're a great developer, right? Here's an example. You're a great developer, okay? Just to let everybody know, he does great websites, okay? Now, I mean, there are certain things like you might work with WordPress if it makes sense to you. You're not just going to build a whole platform. You're going to work with tools out there. You might not, and it might be not be WordPress. It might be some other platform. You might work with 10 different platforms. Mm-hmm. But in a marketplace where the skills and the money and the capability go to where they naturally add the most value. So if someone hires you to develop a website, they're not going to say, okay, build me an entire platform. They're going to say, hey, pick a good platform. Put the feature function set together so I can have my presence, right?
Yep.
So the reason I provide that analogy is that this is the same thing with rare earth in some ways. It's like they just do that, and there was so much money being made. Remember, rare earth by itself is not huge. It's maybe 5 billion, 6 billion. It's not huge. I mean, in the bigger scheme of things, it's nothing. But the key is, it's going downstream. Like, okay, then magnets might be 30 billion. Then you get the next set of products, inputs for automobile, defense, electronics. When it all adds up, you're in the trillions.
Right.
So I don't think it was necessarily we were asleep. I just think it was a natural outcome for how sort of our markets work and the division of labor and where your time and money is best utilized. This is sort of just how it unfolded. I mean, now what's important though is China's grown thanks to initially President Nixon going over there and opening it up, and they've done a marvelous job. They have their problems. They have a lot of contradictions over there that at any time could lead to some kind of downturn. But what I'm trying to say here is that this global milieu of trade and commerce is changing now. That's the difference. And the incoming Donald Trump again really highlights that. Right? It's not business as usual.
Nope, I think everyone recognizes that.
So I'll step back here for a sec.
So you said we probably haven't been asleep. we took the easy way out for getting things processed, build our products, all of that. But in that effort, right, of making things easy, maybe it's better so that I think we did fall asleep. I'm not sure people are going to wake up to the fact of what is going on, unless they are curious about the industry and maybe more specifically the industries they do care about, whether it's technology or automotive or military, right? All those industries that make more money than rare earths in of themselves, right, will be directly impacted, right? One of our contributors just emailed us today an article of China just announced another set of companies that they're going to restrict rare earth trade on, right? Which will directly impact our national defense.
Yeah, that's right.
So I guess that's the question is like, we took the easy way out, but when are we going to wake up to change it? And do we care enough to change?
Well, okay, so as I mentioned before, so that's true. So take a step back. What we've learned, Dustin, is when all this rare earth stuff was outsourced by Japan, by United States, Germany, whoever, nobody thought anything about it. Chinese companies are doing good; they're making money. American or Canadian or what have you are making money. But in 2010, I believe it was 2010, a skirmish broke out between some Japanese company, Japan, and Chinese companies, and that's where, and they started holding back the rare earths. Like that spooked people. Okay, hold on a second here. This isn't just trade and commerce, and again, the analogy in web development. If I'm working on Substack or WordPress, all of a sudden WordPress doesn't let me access their system because I'm a different nationality. Think about that. So then something else happened with the U.S. I think it was 19, and then recently they banned 3 minerals from coming over here. I believe it was 3. So what's happened is there's heightened alert here that hey, we got a problem. There's growing tension between U.S. and China. There's Chinese aspirations for economic dominance. That's real. We've read it. We know it. And they're well on their way, frankly. So, the challenge here is that there's no easy way out of this. Are U.S. and its allies trying to rebuild their rare earth supply chains? Yes, they are. So, what strategies are they using? Not very good ones so far. There are partnerships that are being put together where different Western countries, may align and opt to trade together. There are lots of grants from here in the United States, from Department of Energy and from Department of Defense, as an example. Now, I think it's going to change under the Trump administration. I sense that there's more imminence, and I think that because Trump is more of a business-minded person, I think there's going to be more imminence in all of this. But so far, the initiatives to move the rare earth supply chain, try to rebuild it over here, have been more fluff, very cursory. There's companies that get funded out there that may look at recycling. That's an area, there's disruption in how you actually access the minerals or the elements. There's recycling, but only 1% of all rare earth element supply today comes from recycling. So it shows you how early it is. So the reality is, and what we've really been learning, is that a free market solution, like we're still operating under the assumption that the free market, and hey, if you're an investor, hey, I'm going to fund this company over here and they're going to do some processing, that's going to solve this problem. but it's not, because what the monopoly that's set up in Asia is backed by the second biggest economy, and it's not a free market situation. Now, I believe, in the long run, that model will collapse. Okay, so I think
Interesting.
in the long run, yeah, the free market is going to always prevail, because we've seen with Soviet Union and all of these experiments that have happened in history, they don't last that long. But the problem is, in the long run, could be 50 years. I mean, the economist Milton Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead. So it's just, for the geopolitical realities of today, the long run may not be, we may not have enough time. So, so right now, if we look at alternatives, okay, one is recycling. And within recycling, there's all kinds of different approaches in rare earth exchanges. We're writing about that. We're going into studies, and we're studying, what they're trying to accomplish. We try to summarize that in more consumable English so that business people can better understand it, ourselves included. And so that's been so there's recycling, right? There's also processing. There's technologies that are advancing to be able to process these materials faster, more cleaner, in a more clean way, but it's still early days overall. And so I think that, probably an alternative to a Chinese dominant model is going to be a network of countries that collaborate together and have agreements, and that can have certainty and execute on those agreements. Or it's going to be basically comply with what China wants. And, who knows? For all we know, maybe Donald Trump will fly over to Beijing. He stepped into North Korea. Maybe Donald Trump will fly over to Beijing, cut some deal, and where, they commit to keep prices of rare earths at a certain level, and we commit to help them with certain things. I don't know. It just feels to me that in today's world, that isn't a high probability. So, so if you talk about efforts to break free, I don't see. So take Greenland. I've had a number of people go to me and say, "Hey, Greenland, we get that. We solve this rare earth dilemma." No, we don't. It might help that we have more access to more deposits, right? But it doesn't solve the problem today of how do you effectively process, produce magnets. That's been at the scale that what China's doing. It doesn't solve the problem at all. Does that make sense, Dustin?
Yep, it does, yeah. So I think we could probably leave it there and wrap up for this week's episode. But one thing's clear, it's a complex issue, and awareness and action are going to be critical. I think the West has a long road ahead to level the playing field, but I don't think it's impossible, just a long road.
A long, arduous road.
So, but anyway, any final thoughts, Daniel, before we sign off?
Just, I'm excited about rare earth exchanges. I've always had a passion for geology, mineralogy, and I finally get to, apply it. And I'm excited about the website and the features you're building. I think we have a vision for connectivity and transparency that I think is very exciting. And it's gonna take time. It's gonna be a process, but keep coming to rare earth exchanges. We're aggregating content and adding value by trying to explain where that content's falling short, what where they're getting it, where they're not getting it. Where we're also producing about 20%, 25% of the content is original content around studies, and trying to democratize that information. And finally, we're also consistently transcribing Chinese news and analysis to bring it to the fore here in the United States.
Yep. Yeah, we have a lot going on. So come to the website. We've got daily news updates going on there. We've got a LinkedIn page, our podcast, and you can subscribe to our newsletter so you can get it right in your inbox. But with that, we'll see you guys again next week. We'll tackle another topic, surrounding the rare earth supply chain and how it impacts everything else. So thanks for joining in.
Thank you, everybody.